got a spasm, and his wife was in his arm, and his wife was in the audience, and he was up there. Oh, and all of a sudden, he got the spasm, and his whole arm just came down like this. He lost control, and Debbie said her heart was in her mouth, and he managed to click it in back down here, came back up, turned around, and he had this wonderful thing where he could tilt his head around over his behind and said, "Bet you didn't know I could do that." Carolyn, could you?
Yeah, it was a big part of the show, and what we've done is try and introduce kids, because we use children of all different abilities, and so we've done that in child casting over the years.
Yeah, so presumably there will be more signing in the show. Yes, right over there.
I was wondering how you handle something in the growth sense, like
5 and 6 shows that dealt with the aftermath, and that's where the research department again comes in handy, because they helped us decipher what was important for kids, what they were going through. So we have some very direct storylines. That was where we had a fire in Hooper's store, which helped the kids not only learn about that kind of a disaster, but also that was really important to identify, that kids could identify police and firemen, and sometimes in their full garb, they get a little frightened. Storyline like that. We also did a wonderful storyline about bullying, and also one on loss, where Big Bird has a pet that leaves, and so it was a great storyline for us to deal with loss. And there's been a number of really. The Hurricane series came just before that, and there's a bunch of issues like that. Having Sesame Street be this real place is what's allowed us to deal with a lot of really important issues. We had a 3-part series of Hurricane, but also the aftermath of the community coming together. And those shows have, ever since that aired, it's aired every year during hurricane season in some part of the country that's been affected.
And along with similar, when Mr. Hooper died, I mean, that was maybe the ultimate show in 40 years of helping kids understand what they have to know about death and dying, and I think that basically that someone's going to be there to take care of you, and someone's going to make your bird seats on these kinds of situations, whether it's the 9/11 or whatever, and then writing an incredible script around it.
Yeah, and there's an enormous respect for curriculum. I mean, with the Mr. Hooper show, I've always found it very interesting. Norman Stiles, who we mentioned, who was the head writer of the show for 25 years, wrote that show. And when he worked with curriculum people, a number of potential things to say to kids came up. For example, one of them that I remember is, could you say that he was ill and was very ill? How parents became ill, or if anybody became ill in the family, there would be fear of death. And it was quite extraordinary, how carefully that show was researched, so that nothing was said that would be harmful for a child to hear, and everything was said that would be appropriate and supportive. And the workshop, I think, deals with all tragic situations.
Another role that I think is happening right now that many of you may not be aware of, but I was just in Washington, D.C. 2 days ago, and this woman came up, and her husband was deployed, and they're doing a whole, and fathers leaving for a long period of time. She said it was incredibly helpful to she and her husband and their whole outreach. So, and if you see some of the shows in the third world, like Kosovo and Bangladesh and Africa where Kami Tatalami, Sesame, she's HIV positive, as our leader said, there's 1.8 billion children in the world, Gary, and he said that's 1.8 billion reasons why.
Having an international library of segments, so that eventually international partners will be able to choose segments from other countries, both to show what life in those other countries are like, or if there's a particular issue that one country, for example, if there are other countries that have AIDS issues, that they would be able to take segments featuring Candy and feature them on their shows. So this is something that's in progress now. The website is up, it's being built, and I think it'll make the world a smaller place when Sesames from different countries can begin to share.
And we had a wonderful piece called "Where Does Milk Come From?" Many of you earlier. It was about a 5 or 6 minute segment, and it showed the whole process of farms and milking and the whole thing. And they asked this little boy in England, after the show they were quizzing to see how well it went. They said, where does milk come from? He said, "From America, of course." They said, "Do we really want our children calling lifts elevators and pavement streets?"
Who's now 20, was very young. The first television I let her see was a home home video. That was this was even before Sesame Street really seemed appropriate for her. I had control over it. It was non-commercial. In my case, there were things that I could pre-screen, or there were Disney movies that I could screen. And apparently at about that time, when home video came on the scene, younger and younger children were sat in front of the television because parents could give them things that were hand-selected as opposed to things that were simply broadcast. And it started getting younger. So I think the show really also has responded to that, as have many other children's shows. We really now are looking at a preschool audience of as young as 2 and 3 and 4, and whether we want to or not, that's the reality of what kids are watching these days. Yes,
Such a very, very strong association between the children and Big Bird that if we didn't believe Big Bird when something extraordinary was part of his life, if something extraordinary in a child's life happened, whether it be abuse or whatever, they might be reluctant to go to the adult because they felt they probably might not be believed. So I think that was a really incredibly sensitive thing on the part of the research to say, if this even happened only in one family. I know it was a bit of a problem for the original Gordon, because he lived in Philadelphia, and he had some young children, and they saw him having this wife on Susan on the show. And that was a hard transition for him. I brought my kids in, not to be on the show. I could never handle having my kids on and worrying about what I'm supposed to do at the same time. But anyway, so they each came in, once or twice to meet everybody and so forth. But you were a couple of days ago, and I literally got, "That's your work?" I didn't have so much trouble with it, but no, it's a very credible place to be, and you can really lose yourself in that set because it's so realistic. I mean, the whole set itself being in an inner city environment and so forth. So it's a wonderful place. I mean, you walk